All right, recording is on.
Great. So I think we've only got a few things on our agenda today. So why don't we start with the 1.7 release and spin through the open issues that we're still trying to complete in the milestone. Get a quick update on those and see if there's anything we should be doing differently. So I stuck a link in the agenda doc for those. Looks like we have 5 open issues. What do we say to just going through those one by one and making sure that somebody is running with them? So the first one is actually a relatively recent issue, it looks like. Number 47559 is Bowie here. No, it doesn't look like it. So I think that one is on Bowie's plate. Is anybody up to speed on this one? It's the GCE load balancer loses health check settings when upgrading. Oh, there he is.
Hello.
Hello.
Google is in the house.
Welcome.
Is this being filmed? Because then my bad jokes will be around for. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
it's being filmed. Oh, wonderful. As Tim is out, he's going to be gone, I think, for like several weeks or a couple months. I forget which. So I've volunteered to kind of just be here and sort of act as a improper proxy.
Great. Well, we were just spinning through open issues in the 1.7 milestone.
Okay.
Doing a quick status update on that. The first one is actually one for Bowie, I think.
Cool. Oh, but also I have one item to add to the agenda.
Okay.
Build cop a little bit, and so we can talk about that when we're done.
Sure.
Thanks.
Do you have the issue number?
Yes. I was looking at number 47559.
That's GCLB loses manually modified health check settings when upgrading to 093.
Yeah, so I'm not even sure if you've seen this one yet, but
We know about it.
okay.
I think it's going in. The PR is getting merged. Looks like Federation CI is broken again.
Is that fix number 47567?
Yes.
Cool. That looks like it's got the milestone and everything.
Yeah, I think that one is should be good to go.
Cool. So the next one is 47541. Looks like there's some discussion, and the last thing on it was not a release blocker. Is somebody up to speed with this one?
Let me pull this up. Which one was the number?
47541.
So that issue is pretty light on the details, but if you go to, there's a link in it to issue 46651, which actually has a diagnosis. It's IP mask agent related and
Right.
SNet rule related. So since kubelet and bootstrap scripts run in parallel, the flush may take place after kubelet finishes syncing pods and that role.
So the fix is this. The fix is remove the old kubelet from the old image. That's it.
Wait, but who's going to do that?
Don asked.
Okay,
Zach.
so someone's going to do it.
Yeah. So
This is the CVM issue?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I believe that someone will be rebuilding container VM in order to ameliorate this problem. And if it's not ZML, can you do me a favor? Can you follow up and make sure that ZML is actually going to do it? And if he isn't, then we need to find probably Tim St. Clair or Michael Toffin.
I think he's doing it, but not probably next Monday. That's from his reply.
Oh, he did reply?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then I'm sorry. Thank you. Then that's good.
Mhm.
I didn't see the acknowledgement.
It's
If you have, good enough.
So was there an action there that
So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically that is not an issue blocker because we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
cool? Next on the list is number 47453, which is with me currently. This is just related to standardizing CNI directories in some of the cluster spin up code. There's a PR open for that that's passing tests and just needs to get merged. I think it's been approved at this point. So I don't think there's any action there. Next is 47379.
Yeah, it's got a pretty good diagnosis. Looks like there's no question on that though, and it looks more GC related. Also, note that on a lot of the flakes, we'll talk about flakes next, but there was talk on, I forget which Kubernetes group, about having a SIG for GCP so that things that are specific to the Google cloud infrastructure can actually get tagged with that. And I feel like we've been getting some things tagged as SIG Network that are actually more GCP issues. So something to remember coming up if you're triaging flakes.
Do you mean GCP like end prod infrastructure, or just like GCP being environment based for Google sort of things?
There's like at least two flakes that probably, or at least one flake, I think, that should probably get moved over to GCP since it doesn't look like it has anything to do with network, but it's more about setup of the E2E tests on GCP. They go SIG testing. And then, I mean, for example, with this particular issue, the last comment there, I mean, what theoretically SIG Network is responsible for some of the cloud provider stuff, but I'm wondering where the boundary is between what SIG Network does with respect to cloud providers and the specific configuration that something like the E2 tests need on GCE to actually do their thing.
So like what we generally do, and so I like to copy storage because they've been around and they've been dealing with these things for a bit, and I'm more familiar with it. It may or may not be appropriate. I believe in storage, we still run a bunch of these tests in kind of two environments. There's a Red Hat environment and there's the Google environment. I don't think Azure or Amazon yet has their EDE tests running. And I think what we tend to do is we keep them on the SIG storage label, because, you know, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is make sure that the right people are looking at it. And so, you know, we may or may not make them blockers for the release if we feel that, you know, they're not blockers, but, you know, it depends on what the goal is. Does that seem appropriate, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like from my perspective, in my experience, I have, you know, probably less experience with some of the Google Cloud specific stuff than other people on this team. So I would really have no idea who to ask for some of these things, some of this kind of stuff.
So then I think that's very reasonable. And I also think, though, especially as networking is getting bigger, like at least from the people that I know in this room, let's like take a look at Daniel, who just joined. He does know about, let's say, network policy really well, but he may not know what we do with our DNS that well. Well, maybe he does. He knows a lot of things, but let's just assume he doesn't. You know, so he's kind of in the same boat too, of the area is big and there's a little bit of triage even within the SIG to find the right person.
Right.
Do you feel I'm going to admit my ignorance a bit. Who's the official SIG TL of SIG networking right now, or TLs?
Probably Tim.
So yeah, I don't know who's listed. When Tim's gone, we should definitely find a good triage official person. I know that he's gotten forwarding of issues to me and Bowie while he was gone. But if we have a situation where things are in SIG network and we can't find the right person to own them, that's probably bad. Are we in that situation? I don't know.
Maybe not quite yet.
Okay.
By the way, Dan, you're listed along with Tim and Casey as
No.
the leads, the official leads.
Yeah, we are technically lead. That is true.
So then, I guess my question is, do we need to do a better job with the TLs of the SIG to make sure, dude, is that a TV show or someone being beaten? There's shouting going on.
Yeah, I wish Zoom could tell us where else the sound is coming from.
Yeah, it's intense.
It can tell me as the host at this point, but I don't see it anymore.
Okay, so in any case, Christopher, you're volunteering for the triage role?
Yeah, I already kind of watch the group repository in general, so I do quite a bit of this already.
So that's awesome. So then maybe what we should do is a bunch of us should dump our brains of sort of who knows about what things. And, I don't know if we actually need like a spreadsheet or a real tag list or how we want to do it. Because I do know, like, at least for me internally, when there are DNS issues, I go look at Bowie, and when there's network policy, I go ask Daniel. And, when there's kube proxy, I tend to go, sometimes look at the SIG overall and say, who knows more about these things. But I don't really know across all of the SIG who are the experts and who are the people who both want to be in the know or who could be, held accountable for when things act funky.
I can send a PR to our SIG entry on the community wiki with who I think maybe belongs under the different pieces, and then we can talk on there.
Does that make sense, Dan?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. I think it'd be great to have that kind of more general knowledge about who knows what.
Yeah.
It'll make us a bit more efficient.
This is a wide SIG. Some of the other SIGs aren't quite as wide, and so I think it would be kind of neat too for people to know, who to reach out to. It's also just kind of neat to know what the areas are.
Yep. So, Christopher, I've marked you down as triager and putting an action to update wiki with areas and experts. So I forget, did we get to a consensus on this last issue, 47379? Do we know what the fix is? I think there's an open question with from Daniel.
Yeah, I gotta go talk to people. I don't know. This looks like some sort of tribal knowledge thing. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard for me to tell how long it's been broken. I don't know. Honestly, I need to follow up.
Is this like a part of a cluster operation maintain? Oh man, this is super generic.
Yes. So I got them after the meeting. I'll take a look at it, try to figure out the fix is.
Okay, so you're still running with that one, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm still looking at it. I'm still pretty new, so I'm feeling my way around. So.
Yeah. Lastly, feel free to throw advice, especially like some of us who are new, like Daniel and myself, if you think we're doing something funky.
No, I don't see anything funky going on.
Not yet, anyway.
I'll keep my eyes peeled. So I think there's just one more on our 1.7 list, which is 32796. And this currently doesn't have anyone assigned, but it looks like Bowie was the last to comment and said that this should be moved to the next milestone. So Bowie, do you think this isn't a release blocker then? What's the deal with this one? Doesn't sound like a regression in 1.7 function.
Oh, so this one I got some context. So this one is okay. Here's the thing. I reviewed there's a PR open, and then I review the PR, and then it's touching some very old and then stable pieces. So I feel like we should not rush the PR into 1.7 branch, but I want to get it merged like as soon as possible, and then soak and maybe cherry pick later. Yeah, sounds good.
Yep, that works for me. So we should remove this from the milestone. Who here has the permissions to do that?
I think you had it.
Oddly enough, I have the permissions if needed. How many people here have label permissions now that Tim's gone?
I do.
Okay. Who said I do? I apologize.
Dan Williams.
Okay.
Christopher.
Sweet. So in general, I like to not use them as much in the networking area because I'm not as familiar with it as some of the other areas. So if possible, if you guys want to move it off to next milestone, that would be great. I kind of did a few of them earlier this week just because for 1.7 deadline. If anyone feels like I'm abusing that, please let me know. I'm trying to do this generally as a last resort to get 1.7 out the door based on conferring with a few people, and I try to be conservative with it. Is someone going to move this one then?
I can do it.
Oh, you have label?
Yeah.
Okay, so then Minhan will do it.
Yeah.
You're on mute, Casey.
All right, I'll put that down against Minhan then. Great, so that's the last of the issues in 1.7. I think the next thing on the list was to go through open flakes. So I don't think any of these have been triaged into the milestone, but I'd still like to go through if anybody's working on these and get a feel for what the state of these are. So is anybody present here currently working on one of our open flakes? I can put a link to that in chat.
I did have a question about the first one in the list, 46379.
Yep.
I was kind of going through these before the meeting today, and that's one of the ones where I was kind of thinking that, is that really a SIG network one? Since the only messages there are before suite on node 1 failed, and taking a look at the E2E tests, it doesn't look like there's really that much related in the before suite stuff. I mean, I could be wrong, but the problem is that there isn't any logging for the Ginkgo before suite. And while the before suite stuff does have failure messages, it appears that those don't really get echoed into the log in any good way. Again, I could be wrong on that, but I couldn't see any of that happening. So, I mean, it's kind of a question of, well, first, there isn't really a lot of information in the artifacts or anything like that to tell us what is going wrong.
Yeah, so do we understand why this was put against SIG Network?
Probably because it's, GCE or whatever, and that's vaguely networking related. Which, yeah, I'm not sure that computes. This is one of the ones that I would, once SIG GCP gets created, I'd try to move it over there. The alternative is that there's SIG cluster lifecycle and area platform GC or GKE tags, which was suggested in the interim until SIG GCP happens. So if that sounds like something that would work for people, we could tag those and untag SIG network and see if cluster lifecycle can do better triage.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at the details of this, but if it sounds like there's a problem just where the test infrastructure isn't giving us what we need, then that probably belongs with SIG testing or SIG GCP.
I think the next one's in the same boat. It doesn't fail in the same place, but it's just one of those random ones where something failed somewhere, but it cascaded down such that the entry most people will catch is, oh, it has something to do with DNS. It's currently assigned to you, I think, Bowie.
Which one are you referring to?
46185. In the list of 5, if you're sorted by this newest, it'll be the second one down.
A quick question for people too. The FluentD stuff, is that pod expected to always be running, and is that a condition for starting the tests?
So FluentD, I would expect, runs on every node all of the time as part of Kubernetes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking at a different one of the GKE Master 16 GCI Cube Control SKU. And that does have a little bit more information, perhaps, and it's talking about how the FluentD pods are not running correctly. And when I was looking into some of the artifacts on the GCI GCIP alias build failures, I noticed a lot of FluentD failures with respect to not being able to get credentials. And so it looked like it was continuously being restarted. Which
heard of FluentD that just happened
that
today.
one.
It was affecting a lot of stuff that's related.
So maybe, which one was it? Maybe 46379 is actually the FluentD thing.
So with regard to the authentication problem with FluentD, are we still seeing it, or because I vaguely remember there's a fix for that?
The latest failures for 46379 were on May 24th. It was not that long ago, but still a while. If we take a look at FluentD logs for the first node there, we get an expected error, could not load the default credentials. And that just kind of repeats every couple of seconds.
Do these tests use something like kubeadm? Do you call that? Do they know?
I don't think they do. Could be wrong though.
Yeah, I don't think that they do either.
I also noticed some fixes that went in recently where something about the certificates were not being mounted into some of the containers on kubeadm. I think similar errors were being dumped from there.
So maybe some of the next actions for these ones that are in the gray areas for someone to reach out to SIG testing and see what their advice is on how to go forward with this.
Yeah, I think I originally did assign SIG testing and they removed SIG testing, assigned SIG network. But I'll assign this to myself and I'll look into it.
Awesome. So are there any other flakes that people are working on that they would like to discuss with the the larger group.
Hi,
I
this
took
is
one last week that's not officially called the Flake, but it was a race condition that I'm having trouble really diagnosing what I'm seeing in the logs. I could use some help. I'm just new to this. I posted in the Kubernetes dev Slack channel, gotten no response. So I don't need to take, the group's time, but if someone could just work with me and diagnose, figure out whether my fix is suffering from another flake or actually has a problem, that would be great.
Sure. Is that in a PR number?
Yes. So the PR number, let's see if I got it around here somewhere. Oh gosh. Yes, it's 47262.
47262. Yeah, I can take a look at that, and then trying to dig into the failures and see if it's a flake or something else.
All right, thank you.
Hi, this is I was working on 45915 and there is a PR open for like 15 days. But when I go to the PR page, it says submit key over there says this has been, the milestone is for a future release and cannot be merged. Is that true? But it shows up in the list for the milestone for this release.
Can you ping that one to, can you tag me on that? I'll track it down with the release manager.
Who is this? Sorry.
This is Bowie, B-O-W-I.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry. OWEI.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, I think you commented out today.
Yeah, we should just get that added to the milestone. I think there was also talk about lifting the code freeze on master very soon. So that might just go in automatically soon.
Okay.
So shall I move on to IPv6 update from the IPv6 working group?
Sure, I'll take that. I provided links just to PRs and issues. The PRs are starting to stack up, but that's understandable since there's a focus on the 1.7 release. Bullet 3 is just looking for guidance to start building V6 end-to-end tests. So if anyone on the call can maybe provide some pointers in the Google Doc, it would be appreciated. Just looking for suggestions on looking at existing tests, if so, which one maybe to look at, and if there's any points of contact that have end-to-end test experience or understanding some of the restrictions that may apply to the GCE environment. Second to last bullet with logistics of updating the kubelet host port package. I saw that CNI recently merged the port map meta plugin. And so I was just looking at any logistics on when we should start looking at bringing that functionality into the kubelet.
Yep. Also, the host local ranges stuff, which will provide dual stack addressing for host local, got merged this morning or yesterday. So I think what you're waiting for on the CNI side is probably a CNI release, which I think I promised to Minhan last week, or not promised to, but promised to bring up in the maintainers meeting. So we can still bring that up again and try to get a CNI release that then we can get added. The binaries at least added into the infrastructure.
Cool.
And
do you mind maybe just throwing comments in by those two bullets just so I can use that as reference as we move forward on these efforts? So yeah, I think Dan kind of commented on those last two bullets under V6 update. And then I added one other bullet just around, any updates related to the pod multi-networking design spec.
So I don't think there are updates for that. There are people talking about it on the mailing list using the Multis CNI plugin. So if you're not aware of that thread, I would take a look there. I think that's where the latest for that discussion is.
I'll do that. Thanks.
For E2E testing, there's a easier way to test out your changes. I assume that you will start from kubelet with regard to the IPv6 related changes. You can try out the node E2E test. You can find out the commands in the make file under the root directory of Kubernetes repo. And then there's a E2E node test something out there, and then you can find the entry point, and there's a bunch of flag available. Yeah, and then you can try. It can run remotely or locally. Remotely, you basically will provision a VM by default in Google Cloud. But like if you want to run it locally, then you can select the local run. And the local run, by default, it only reuses the Docker zero bridge. It doesn't use the CNI setup, so you have to override some of the test configs to ask it to use CNI network plugin. Yeah, that's it.
And do you make reference to the node end-to-end tests just from the kubelet standpoint? Because I know we've got PRs that are sitting in the queue related to like the node controller package for managing the cluster cider and other aspects of Kubernetes.
Oh, that one, then you need a cluster E2E, not the node E2E.
Yeah, and I think that's what Tim was alluding to 2 weeks ago, and using GCE. And I'm unfamiliar with maybe some of the restrictions of GCE. And I guess if it is a cluster test, it is like the GC, some of the other tests, not so much the node end-to-end test. With some of these other tests like the AWS or GCE or the etcd3 tests that are out there, are those maybe good reference points for us?
So GCE currently doesn't support IPv6. I'm not sure like running it against GCE makes sense, but like with regard, so you want a general like reference to running E2E tests? That's what you're asked for, or you want more specific?
I mean, I think the ideal thing would be to run tests in GCE the same as we can run all the rest of them. Unfortunately, since it doesn't support IPv6, we may need to make some kind of overlay test. Maybe that's a little, too complicated. But if it's valuable to have these kinds of CI tests run somewhere with infrastructure like GCE or AWS that can be provisioned, fairly easily through the Kubernetes organization, then maybe we do need to start investigating how to set up some kind of overlay so that we can run nodes with IPv6.
Yeah, I wonder if we can add these to something like COPS. If AWS supports IPv6 and COPS runs are already run on every single PR, catch them there. I think the overlay solution was the one that Tim was mentioning a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, another alternative is that what we do for OpenShift local development is we have Docker and Docker, where we literally have each machine or each node, including the master, as a Docker container. And inside that, you actually run, say, kubelet, and then kubelet will run Docker containers inside the Docker container that are the actual pods. And so in that way, you can kind of, on a single machine, configure a cluster just running in Docker containers, and then you can do whatever you want. That
that's not a bad approach.
It's also incredibly fast to spin up.
Yeah.
So,
Dan, is there any information to better understand how OpenShift is using Docker and Docker for that?
yeah, I mean, it uses some of the local provisioning infrastructure, and then we have a script that actually runs through and sets those kinds of things up. If you want to ping me offline, we can talk about that.
All right, I will. Thanks.
Okay. Unless there's more discussion on that, I think that's the end of our agenda for today. Is there anything else that somebody wanted to say?
I got 2 items.
I was going to ask about the multi-networking. I know that there was some discussions going on, and there was some decisions whether annotations should be used or Kubernetes API. So I had your comment on the network object, that maybe the best way to go about it is through the third party resource. But my question is, there was a lot of components involved, such as service, logic network. Do we want to use annotations for all of that, or was the decision to use annotations for some of it and then some others go to Kubernetes source code? So,
so I think it's probably best if we continue that discussion on the mailing list thread.
Okay.
When you say Kubernetes source, do you mean like the actual Kubernetes API and objects?
Yes. Like everything has to be outside in annotations or on the CNI plugin side, or we want to have some of them implemented Kubernetes API and some of them through annotations. Like what if some of them is, for example, here we have the network object that could be done using a third-party resource, and we also have, let's say, the network object we want to use for the pod that has to go into the pod annotation. So that's basically where I'm a bit confused. What was the consensus?
I mean, I think at this point, everything that was proposed to be an object in the Kube API would have to be a third-party resource, and then anything that was proposed to be a property on an existing Kube object would be an annotation.
Okay. Or potentially label, but yeah, one of
Yeah,
those.
it could be, yeah. But yeah, we can follow up on the mailing list.
Sure. Yeah.
I am reminded of 2 issues I haven't discussed yet with this group, and I'm just looking for pointers at this point. One is I've heard that third-party resources are kind of running out of steam, and there's a new thing, custom resource definitions, coming in to pick up the future. Have I got that right?
Yes. So Mike, I want to stop just for a second because I realized I cut Michael Rubin off.
Yeah, I have 2 items. Is it okay? They're pretty quick. One of them is just making sure everyone's aware of the ingress load balancer issue that showed up in 164 and 165 and 158. Basically, we're kind of making the recommendation, at least in Google, that no one ever use those releases ever. There's an oversight in that. I think this actually is something that we should add to an agenda item for a later date about ingress in general. Because I think that at least from our perspective in Google, it looks like there's a lot of work to be done there. The spec of the ingress object has a lot of different ways to set up health check or readiness handlers. I'm looking around the room for the people who understand this better than I do, and on the SIG conference call too. And it looks like what happens is that there's one way to set a health check with manual settings, and during in 164, 165 and 158, we clobber those settings, and the customer who has them, they're gone, and they don't come back, at least in the Google environment. And so the result is that you stop forwarding traffic to backends, because the backends look unhealthy, and they always will look unhealthy during an upgrade process. And so, if you set the settings on a new cluster, it's not a problem, but we've lost them. There's a fix that's going into head, I think, today, and then we'll cherry pick them into 166 and 159 as soon as possible. But it's something that I thought people on at least the networking SIG, everyone should be aware of. And I think
this is a problem with upgrade to those specific resources or
yes,
releases?
Upgrade to those releases, and you have manual settings set, then you're going to lose them.
Thank you.
So yeah, be aware. And there's, even though this exists in the, what's the name of that repo? That's for the ingress repo again?
It's called ingress.
Oh, it's just called the ingress repo?
Yeah.
You mean we named something like what it should be named? Really? Yeah. Kubernetes? Okay, cool. So if in the ingress repo, the issue is there, but Dawn actually asked for it to also be brought into the Kubernetes repo. So it's a bit more obvious and easier to track. So if we want, we can send that to SIG Networking. But if you're in SIG Networking, you should be aware of it. It really does bring to light that we have a lot of debt with ingress overall in both the functionality and the execution, and also just kind of the API and the spec itself. And I'm hoping that in 1.8 that, I know at least over in Google, we've got some people that will start focusing on this, and we invite anyone else who's interested to work with us. And so I'm excited to see what'll come about. So that's thing number one. Is there any controversy on this? I mean, am I wrong? Is there people who feel that ingress looks great as it is, and we shouldn't touch it? And if so, that's cool too, and I'd love to hear that.
I don't think you're going to hear that.
Okay, cool. So good. It's hard to know on VC. And then the other item is, this is coming up in a lot of the SIGs, which is, I think we may need something like what we call like a build cop rotation, whereby, we have these dashboards now for all these EDE tests. Who watches them? Like in Federation, at least, and in storage, we had a problem where we had all these tests, and when they went red, nobody knew. Or we kind of, even worse, everyone knew, but you sort of thought somebody else was going to be on it. Do we have a rotation now where, I don't think it needs to be like a 24/7 sort of thing, but someone comes in the morning and goes, oh, look, this is broken, we should file an issue or look into it or triage it appropriately? I'm sorry, Kaveh, is something wrong, or I can't see the whole comment?
Oh, actually, it's not about this guy. It's about the third-party resource. And so the suggestion was that third-party resource should be used for multi-networking, and it says it's not stable yet. So it's a bit why I was confused.
Okay. But
yeah.
Do you want to go to that? Or do you want to finish this topic, or?
Let's finish this topic, and then we can switch.
Oh, okay, cool. So do we have something in place right now in networking?
No, I was going to ask a question. Is there anything in like the sort of Git tooling where you can email the people who wrote the bill, like the changes that happen between a working
we
build
have PR submit blockers that should let people know beforehand. I don't know if we have any tooling now that says, oh, look, the EDE test is busted. It could be from this group of folks. That's a good question. But I think the big thing, though, is just knowing that when it is busted, and at least having the SIG know and dive into it. And I know at least in Federation, they have to, at this point, dive into it, find out that PR themselves, which makes me think that maybe that tooling doesn't exist yet. Yeah, your question of which boards we need to monitor, this is where my lack of intimacy in the SIG is definitely showing itself. Does anyone else know?
I think test infra folks, we're going to put in a tab for SIG Network.
I think they did. I don't know how it works, but I saw it.
Okay, so it's there. Let me double check.
Also,
Can you paste a link?
Yeah, one second. Let me find it.
And
yeah, there's one. Yeah, they put it there.
Maybe
it's currently nothing there. So basically,
okay, it's empty.
It's empty. But so we had a tab for SIG Network. Let me put it.
Okay, we have to figure out how.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, I think I know where. So actually, I'm thinking that for the next meeting, I will get a doc together about sort of, since we're hopefully after the 1.7 release, an early 1.8 release cycle. Kind of, I'll just put some ideas for tasks about the tests and cleaning them up and sort of populating this dashboard and that sort of stuff. So that's thinking.
Do you have bandwidth to do that yourself, really?
I'll at least kick this session started off. Next meeting.
Okay.
Not this meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know you've got a lot of 1.7 stuff that you're trying to get out the door. So that's like in the next, do we meet every week or every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's good. I wanted to make sure that you weren't putting too much on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, so just putting it out there. So that'll show up in the agenda at some point.
Awesome.
And the last sort of addendum to that is at the leadership summit, like, God, it was only 2 weeks ago. There was a big sort of call for stability. There was sort of a sentiment that I thought, in line of this, which is where some of this is coming from, is that Kubernetes, there was a belief that seemed widely held that in many ways Kubernetes is very successful because of the functionality of what it's doing today. And that while there is definitely room for, oh, by the way, Christopher says he can help you with some of the testing stuff.
Yeah, Chris, so I'll ping you.
So even though, there's always more functionality to add, there's also a feeling that it may be becoming more and more paramount to have predictability and stability in what we're doing. I know that the storage SIG definitely went through this period about 6 to 9 months ago and has sort of gone through it in many ways. It still has work to do, but it's a lot more stable than it used to be. Definitely a lot more stable than it used to be. And so this is something else that, was anyone else at the Leadership Summit? I can't remember. I was kind of really tired. Okay.
I was there.
So do you want to maybe comment on this instead of me talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, there was kind of an overwhelming sentiment I felt from the discussions that, we should be looking to bring all the stuff we've got to GA, polish it off, make it less flaky, and smooth out all the rough edges and corner cases that might not be being addressed today. So, there's a conflict there between a lot of people wanting to add all kinds of new features and the kind of less glamorous work of polishing off what we've got. But there was certainly agreement. Everybody I spoke with and in the group discussions as well agreed that the best way to kind of continue Kubernetes success at this point and make sure that it stays as successful is to spend some time polishing off and stabilizing what's currently there. So APIs like Ingress, which are beta and haven't seen some love in a while, putting in the effort there to bring that to GA and decide what needs to be done in order to do that.
So yeah, I mean, I'm so excited to be coming to my first SIG networking in a while and talk about all these boring things. But I thought it was important, and I think it's something that we should be thinking about. So that's it. That's all I have on my agenda. Thank you for giving me the time to talk about it. I think Mike had stuff that he had next.
Yes, I wanted to ask about two things. The successor to third-party resources and maintaining referential integrity.
All right, ask away.
Well, so I guess I'll just finish asking the two, right? I asked the first one. The second one is, as far as I understand, the Kubernetes API machinery simply does not have a way to maintain referential integrity. That's to say, if one object references another in a way that it really depends on it, and we don't want the second object to be deleted as long as the first object is referencing it, the API machinery doesn't really have support for that. And
isn't there an object ref thing?
there's kind of some support for that, but there's some difficulties. Now I'm just realizing I haven't got it all swapped in, but I asked recently about the example of a pod and PVC, right? If a pod is using a PVC as a volume, you don't want the PVC to be deleted while the pod is there. I think I asked in the API machinery SIG, and they said go ask in the storage SIG, and they said, yeah, we're talking about it. We haven't really got a solution. The problem is that you can do all the checking you want in the API server, but that's not where the atomic transactions happen, right? You can have multiple API servers running concurrently, and the atomic transactions happen in etcd. So anyway, I just wanted to know, my question was not to pretend that this group is the API machinery group, or what. My confusion came from the fact that they sent me to the storage guys who said there's discussions. I don't know where these discussions are. I'd like to catch up with what they're talking about. So my question to this group is simply, who do I talk to?
It does. Seems like we're going to redirect back to API machinery.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me, API machinery, if you're asking about like what sort of contract you have between objects and as they refer to each other in the API, you know, API machinery does feel the right one. Like Daniel Smith or Brian are probably the people to tag with that. And you know what? I mean, if I were you, as this thing sort of, if I were in your shoes and I really cared, I would send mail to Kubernetes-dev and say, you know, this feels to me like a sort of cross-SIGI sort of question, and see if I get a response there.
All right, thank you.
If you want to, I can try to bring Brian to see if he can notice this also.
All right, if you could, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, you may want to. I have no memory because, you know, I'm just, that's just who I am. It's very sad. Feel free to like poke me, like send that mail, and if you want, forward it to me personally and say, hey, Mike, you know, this might be something Brian's interested in, because I may forget.
Okay, so now I have to admit I'm not sure how to address you.
Oh, dude works pretty well. No, I'm mrubin at google.com, or I'm matchstick on GitHub.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
So my other question then was about the successor to third-party resources. I hear there is one in the works. I was just wanted to get as a reading on the status. I feel like I'm kind of missing something. I don't really know how to track what's going on overall in Kubernetes. So in particular, I don't know what's the status of the successor.
So I think the place to look there, I think there's a features, a Kubernetes/features issue, which is tracking that for 1.7. I can find a link for that for you.
You are also communicating something I'm hearing from a bunch of people, and I feel myself too, which is, how do you keep track of all of the stuff going on in Kubernetes? And, you know, I was just talking to Sarah Novetny about this in the community meeting today, and there seems to be even more avenues and channels than I can shake a stick at. So I think she's probably a good person to sort of ask this question too, because she seems to know what they all are. They all seem to roll up to her quite often.
Oh, well, if you're telling me the answer is ask Sarah, that's probably not really the right answer.
No, but she might know the channels to direct you to in the future. That's all.
All right, thank you.
That's, you know, she that's all I'm trying to say.
I put a link to the thread in that was on this dev mailing list in the chat. You want to look at that? That has a bunch
Oh, it's got renamed. That's the old thread that was about just about third-party resources. Now it's got repurposed. Okay.
So I got a quick comment on your first question. So regarding the operation interaction between objects, I asked the same question, like a similar question to Daniel Smith, and then he said that right now it's not doable with the current API machinery, but probably you can look into the admission controller, maybe, but not. It depends on your use case.
No. Admission controller will not solve the problem because there are potentially several of them running concurrently. They don't do atomic transactions.
Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I have this pointer, but yeah, give you some context. No.
All right. I think we have come to the end then. Anybody have more to say in the last 2 minutes? Guess not. Well, thanks for coming, and we will meet again in 2 weeks.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.